I'm Sherry. This is number 2 in our Longarm series. Every Wednesday I'll be having a video on using the Moxie XL from Handi Quilter and Pro Stitcher Lite on the loft frame. So today we're simply going to show you how to load your backing, your batting, and your quilt top. But first, I had a little prep that I needed to do before I load them on here. So prep to our backing and to our top. So I'm going to insert that clip right here so that you can see how to get ready before we even go to the loft frame. To get the quilt top and the quilt backing ready for the Longarm, there's a few things that has to be done away from the Longarm first, and that being making a good check of your quilt top, and that includes several things. Most importantly, the back side needs to be gone over pretty closely to make sure that there's no loose threads on it. Normally I would take this, and I think I have already done this once, but I would take it outside and give it a good shake to get the initial threads off of it, and then I would take my lint roller and go over it too in sections until I feel satisfied that I've gotten most of the loose threads off. And especially since this one has a lot of pure white through it, although it's white on white, it's going to be harder to see a thread through it. But just in case there happens to be some dark threads hanging out on the back that might show through to the front, because once you get it on the Longarm you can't get those out. So I'm going to do that, and then I also want to make sure that my quilt top is square. So usually what I do is I fold it once and then another time the other direction, so in fourths you might say. Let me get it ready here so you can see what I mean. So I folded it in half lengthwise and then in half widthwise. And I'm just going to make a good check to see if it's fairly square. Not all quilt tops are going to be able to be trimmed very much, if any. If you have star points, you're not going to be able to trim those down if it's not completely square. But since I made this quilt top, I feel pretty confident that it's square enough. I don't have to really, get it perfectly square. Now this is a pattern too, as you can see around my edges here, there are no points. So I technically could get it into a perfect square. I feel like it's pretty close. So I don't think I'm gonna trim anything off of this one. But those are some things you need to consider, as well as, since this one does not have a solid border strip around it, I have all of these loose, well, I have a pretty good habit of back tacking my seams. But the rule of thumb is go through and put a basting stitch all the way around a quilt like this that has a lot of seams. So I'm going to do that about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I'll do that just on my regular sewing machine. And then after that, we will deal with our backing and see what we need to do with that. Alright, so I got that sewed all the way around. I just put it right inside my 1/4 inch line with my 1/4 inch foot. So a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. I didn't have too many edges that were coming apart, but I did have some. So this will save my quilt as I'm putting it on the Longarm, and with all of the rolling and unrolling, you don't want your stitches to come out, so this will help immensely. So in the professional quilting world, that's called the victory lap. So before you send a quilt out to a Longarmer, you'll want to do that victory lap if you don't have a border on the outside, an unpieced border, that is. So any piecing that comes all the way to the edge will need to be victory lapped or sewn down. I just used a 2.5 inch. You could use a longer stitch if you wanted, 3 or 4 even, just to make sure you get those little seams secure. So you want it to be secure, and you want it to be free of threads. And the last thing you want to do here before we go into the long arm is to measure it, and this will be just kind of a rough measurement. I've already pressed this. If you haven't pressed yours, go ahead and press out the big wrinkles, and then we will have some opportunities to remove some wrinkles later if we encounter them along the way, and I'll be showing you that. But yes, I use these little Avery labels that are 1 by 2 3/4, and I have measured my quilt, and it's 62.5 by 71.5 inches. So I'm going to stick that on one corner of my quilt here so that when I get inside I can transfer that figure over to the other places that I need to know it for. So let's go ahead and fold this back up with that label out, and then we will deal with our backing. So you want your backing to be about 10 inches bigger than your quilt top, and that's because that will give you roughly 5 inches all the way around to be able to get your backing to be clamped in with plenty of room outside of your actual quilt top. So we want room to clamp it, and so I have a 108 by 108 here, and yes, that's way bigger than I need, 62.5 by 71.5. So I'm going to cut this. This is a 108, means that that's 108 inches wide, and then there's 3 yards of it, so that's 9 feet, and that's 108 inches long as well. So I need to cut a piece that is 62.5 plus 10, that's 72.5, by 71.5 plus 10, or 81.5 long. So let me do that first. I will probably go ahead and run it lengthwise. I don't have to piece this, so I can run it lengthwise, and that way my selvages are on the edges, which is handy. So this is folded in half here. So this is 108 divided by 2. This is what you're looking at right now. So I'm just going to keep that folded up, and I'm going to cut me a piece that is 81.5, because I want 10 inches more than my length. So let me measure that. There's my 81.5 mark. I'm going to stick it on this 30 spot right here. And it doesn't have to be exact, just as long as you get 4 or 5 inches on the outer edge. So I'm going to get my longest ruler that I have and try to get this cut nice and straight. And this is my excess, so this can be used as binding or just extra fabric for another project. And what was that other measurement I needed? The width was 62.5, so I need 72.5. So I will be cutting one of my selvages off, or I could cut both of my selvages off at the same time. But I think what makes most sense is to get a wider piece. So I'm just going to open this completely up and measure 72.5 across here. So here is my 72.5, and since I have this all open, the easiest thing to do is to rip it. So I'm just going to make a little notch there and just rip it. And that keeps me from having to guide a ruler across 108 inches. So here's another big piece that I have left over for another project. So I've folded my big piece in fourths. I folded it lengthwise and then I folded it crosswise. So what I should have when I get finished is about 5 inches all the way around if I fold this the same way. So let me fold it lengthwise and then once crosswise. And there we go. Now this is folded, so it's half of that, but we see that we have what we need all the way around. So we've got 5 inches, about 2.5 all the way across. Remember, this is folded in half both ways. So once it's all folded out, we'll have 5 inches all the way around. Does that make sense? So this is about what it should look like if you fold it in fourths. And that'll tell you if you've got a good 1.5, 2 inches all the way around. If you lay those right on top, lay the top right on top of your backing, folded. If you had a big enough space, you could just spread it out on the floor. You could see, but that's a lot of work to get down on the floor and do that. So this is what I do. And now I see that I have enough all the way around it. Okay, that's it. Now, if you've got some great big wrinkles in your backing, you're going to want to go ahead and get those out with your iron now, because you won't be able to see this once you get going on the long arm. On the top, if you have some bad wrinkles still that are showing up, you can deal with those while they're on the long arm. But on the back, you cannot. So you want to make sure, like see, I have some pretty deep ones here. I want to put this on my ironing board now so that I can get this straightened out before I load the backing on. So let me get my ironing finished. I'll probably look at my top again too, just in case, and get any severe wrinkles out, and then we're ready to load it. So I hope you found some helpful tips from that little session there of getting our top and our backing ready. While you were watching that, I prepared my batting. I have rolled batting as I showed on the first video, and it is 90 inches wide. So I cut off a length that was about 6 inches more than my width, and then my 90 inches will work for my length. And I'm not going to go ahead and cut that to size yet. I'll just wait until I get finished with my quilt and then trim that off. Another couple things you need to do before you start opening everything up and spreading it out everywhere is get rid of all the dirt and lint threads that you may have from your last project. Blow out your tracks, your machine, the parts that you can get to, especially the bobbin area, and also vacuum your floor, because more than likely some of your fabric or your batting is going to be touching the floor at some point in this process. Here is a tool that I use, my Longarmer that I was using. Mary at Broken Dishes Quilting, she recommended that I get this when she heard that I was getting a long arm. And this is a Ryobi 18-volt lithium battery ran blower, and it's just air. It's just like a blower for blowing leaves, but it's handheld. So if you can't find this on Amazon, there are some like it. So just get something like it. That way you don't have to keep buying canned air, which tends to have a little moisture in it, which is controversial as far as our machines and using it around machines. So get that in your little supply of things. I don't know if I mentioned this last week on the first video or not, but I find this invaluable. So let's go on to our next steps. Okay, so one thing that we need to do, and we could have done this in the prep of our backing as well when we were in another area doing that, but we want to find the center of it on the top and the bottom. So I have this piece. I know that this piece going this way folded is my width. So you want to mark your width on the top and the bottom of your backing. So all I do is fold it and then take a little tiny wedge out just so I can see where that is. So that is one end of it, top or bottom, and then I need to go to the other end and do the same thing. And you want to be accurate on this. You want to make sure you have those exactly lined up from edge to edge, and then cut another wedge. Okay, so that's one thing we have to do. The other thing is we need to find that center on the bottom of our quilt top. So I need to figure out what is the bottom of my quilt top. I don't think that there is any directional fabric in this. Let me see. Yes, there is. There are some birds. So that tells me that's right side up. So I need to find the center of the bottom. Do not clip a wedge out like I just did. What you want to do is mark it with a pencil or pen or something, or just a straight pen. You could mark it with a straight pen. So I think that's probably what I'll do. I'll just kind of fold this, make a little crease, and grab a pen and stick in it. On the right side. So I just stuck my little pen in the fold there. When I open it out, that's going to be the center of the bottom. So we've got that figured out. So let's just set our quilt top aside for now, and also our batting. And you no longer need your scissors. Now you need pins. More than likely your pins that came with your machine are these, and they are fine to use. I happen to love Taylor Sewell pins, and these are Longarm pins. They're fine too. I don't really see any advantage to buying these pins, although it was something that I treated myself to. I do like the little tiny heads on them. They're very easy to hold on to. These are just as fine. I think maybe the Taylor Sewells are, yes, they're about 1/4 of an inch longer. So I can see that as being advantageous as well. But sometimes I run out of these, and if I've got a really big quilt on and I have to resort to these, and I don't have any problem with those at all. So if you got some with your Moxie, you might as well use them until you get used to your machine and what you like and what you might want to buy extra as far as accessories. So now let's start loading on the back first. Here's how I'm starting. I've spread out my backing completely, and I have the width across the bars there underneath. We're going to wrap our backing underneath our bars. This bar, this outer bar, is for the bottom of your backing. And then on the back, you're going to go underneath this way, and it's going to be attached up here. On these leaders, you should have already marked the center part, the center point of each and every one of your leaders. And then before you start as well, I like to straighten all my leaders out and make sure they're even on the ends. Some may argue that this is not important, but it's just something that I like to do. So I check all the ends and make sure they're not all wonky and somewhat even. And you can just take from the center and spread out in both directions to get it even on the ends. I just like to start out nice and neat so that I don't run into any weirdness along the way. Because when you're learning, you just don't need to have complications of something just being messy and then you don't have it wrapped up right. So what I need to do is I need to get, this is the bottom of my backing, and I need to get it, that little wedge that I cut, to here. Okay, so after getting your leaders all straightened out, you take the bottom of your backing and put that notch right where our center line is on our leader that we have pre-marked, and just start adding pins. And you want to take a big space there and just leave about a 1/2 inch on the end of your pin. I leave about the same as the head, which is a 1/2 inch. And then when you get to the end, turn a pin this direction just to kind of keep you from having to ram your finger into a sharp pin. So I like to pin on the fabric instead of on the leader side. It's just the way I like to do it. It really doesn't matter, so don't get too hung up on that. But that does mean that I have to let this ratchet go. I'll have to let it free to start rolling this up the way I want to roll it up. So as I roll this up, I'm just going to keep everything nice and neat. I'm going to make sure that I get everything nice and neatly started. And I'll make many trips back and forth, and keeping this little edge straight. And then at the same time, you don't want to cause any wrinkles to get into the body of it. And then once I get this all rolled up, I'm going to leave enough unrolled to go up under here and attach to this leader. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is what it should look like. It should be, the outside is showing, it's underneath, and the wrong side is underneath all the poles. Now I've got it draped over the back poles, but I'm going to take this down. I just have it up there like that because it was slipping off. So I'm going to take this down and go underneath. I'll show you from the other side. Okay, so here again you have your mid spot on your leader right where your little wedge is for the top of your backing. So that is hanging over, and if you look on the other side, this bar, which nothing ever gets attached to this bar, it's just there to guide things as you roll up and down. So there's our bottom, here's our top. Let me go around to the other side so that you can see what this looks like when I get it completely rolled up. So it should look like this. You've pulled from your top the leader all the way down into a little bit of your frame space. The frame space is your sewing space. Now you can see, I want you to watch. You can see when I pull my long arm in, it stops about right there. Hence why it's important to make sure you have enough at the top and the bottom. Now I have pinned this so there's only about 1/4 inch left up under there that won't get used, but then your frame space is only this much. That's as far as the machine will move. And that will be important for you to realize when we go to stitch a design. And we'll get into that. Yes, I pulled it even a little bit farther towards me, and that way my frame space stops right at the top. Now you won't be sewing in that area, you'll be sewing a little bit below it, but not much. Just make sure that you don't pull it so much that your frame space has the leader in it, because if it has a leader in it, you're going to sew in your leader. So that's a definite bad thing you don't want to happen. So here we are. We don't have any wrinkles across where it's sagging from one side to the other like a diagonal sag. We don't have that. I do have it a little bit loose right now so that I can work with my top and my batting. So let's do that next. Remember how we marked the middle bottom of our top? Of course, our top is right side up. So find the pin that you marked your middle with, or your mark if you left a mark, and pin the bottom of your quilt top onto that leader where it's marked in the center. And there's a little black mark there, just like my other leaders had. So now I know I'm in the right spot. I'm in the center of my leaders, of my poles. So this time, unlike the backing where I pinned the backing to the leader, I'm pinning the leader to the bottom. So the bottom of the quilt top is behind my leaders. So I'm actually pinning on the leader and not on the back where the top is. So now you can probably see the importance of putting that little seam all the way around our quilt top. See how we're fiddling with the edges of our quilt top a lot here, especially on the end. So that will keep that from coming undone. It's pretty important to do it actually, unless like myself, I tend to backstitch on the ends of all of my seams, but once in a while I will miss one, and then that could easily just pop open as I'm doing this process. So I'm just going to go down through here and continue. And I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I'm just pinning 1/4 of an inch down on all of these. And you can eyeball that. You don't have to measure it. I'm just going to continue this way and then come back to the middle and continue that way, and then run my last pin towards the center. All my pins are in, and now I'm just going to keep my eye on that center and start rolling carefully. And then once you get around the pole one time and start getting layers, round layers on the ends, just check those and make sure they are all lining up well. I take my time on this. I find it therapeutic to get it on there perfectly, and I don't have to wonder somewhere in the middle of the process, did I roll this on crooked? No, I don't want to be doing that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to roll the entire length of my quilt down until I have it laying flat on top of my backing. And I'll show you where I stop on that. Okay, so I tend to leave about 3 inches between my leader edge that I can see and my quilt top. There's no more pinning left to do. You're done with the pinning. Once you do the 3 bars, 2 for your backing, 1 for the bottom of your quilt top, you're finished. So don't be too concerned with getting this 3 inches exact at this moment. Just kind of get it straight looking, and you can use a little ruler to go through there, because we're going to lift this up. We're going to have to put our batting in. So our batting goes between the top and the back, obviously. So I'm going to get the width of my batting ready here. That's my 90, and this is my, I think I did 68. And then if you have a scrim or a bumpiness on the back of your batting, put that downward, not upward. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lay this on here kind of evenly. And I usually have just a little bit less than my backing. So what I'm going to do is get this nice and straight. I'm going to take my bottom and kind of do an accordion, because this is 90. We're going to be trimming this off later, much later. So I just do kind of an accordion drop to the floor there, kick it out of my way. One of these days I'm going to get one of those hammocks that you attach to your frame, and it sits rolled up in a hammock instead of on the floor. But for now, this is fine. So I have my batting right up to the edge of my leader, of what I can see of my leader here. And I want to give myself a little bit of room here. Make sure you've got a little bit of room up to that pole, and be very ginger with your batting, because you can poke a hole in it really easily. So now that I have that there, I'm going to roll this in a little thin tube like this, and then stuff it underneath between those two poles. And then I'm going to lift up my top and grab it again very gingerly and get it right back up there where it was. And I actually have a little extra up there, which is fine. And get it as straight as possible with your sides, with the top. And there we go. Our top goes back down. And there again, we can just kind of see about where it is. We just want to make sure it's nice and straight. So that's quite a bit for today to load on a quilt. It's a little bit tiring sometimes, but once you get it all on, you feel good and you're ready to go and get that design stitched out on it. The next time that we speak, we will talk about threading the machine, the bobbin winder, and the bobbins, and all of that sort of thing, and also a little bit about bobbin tension. And then from there we'll just go on to the next step and the next step and the next step. So hang with me on these videos. I hope you're learning something from each one of them that is helpful, and you can send any questions you have in the comments down below, or to an email directly to me, and that email address is in the description box. Thanks for hanging out with me on Loading a Quilt, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye.